Friday night, just 3 days earlier, I stopped at Toby's Bar and Grill about at 7:30 p.m. Having spent the last 2 days in the Big Apple closing the discussions with a major multinational bank, I was dead weary. I had been negative that we would never be able to strike an agreement when the day had begun, but it seemed that the great challenges began to fall like dominoes just as our Friday meeting began. Just 2 sticking points remained around midday. We agreed to pause and go eat by ourselves. I ordered a sinfully huge pastrami and Swiss on rye from a nearby Jewish deli and delighted every mouthful. George Willis, the bank's senior negotiator, remarked when we got back together at 1:30, "We've made a ton of progress." I suggest we divide the last 2 points halfway. George passed a document across the meeting table, and I read his proposed ideas. It most certainly wasn't splitting the difference, but it was readily within the limits of what my partners and I would have tolerated to land this big deal. George told me he would email a formal contract to me on Monday, and I scuffed my initials on the paper. We shook hands and then each turned away in different directions. I returned to my hotel packed, checked out. Since my fiancée Emily was away for the weekend with her 2 elder sisters, I thought of staying in the city overnight. They were lodging in one of Connecticut's enormous Indian casinos. Their evenings would be in the better pubs and restaurants. Their days would be spent at the pool and spa. Rather than spending another night apart from home, I went to Grand Central Station and got the Metro North train to New Haven. I had drove up I-91 toward Hartford at 7:30 and left the highway. I was meandering through the always popular downtown West Hartford. I made a stop for dinner. Sitting in Toby's pub, I saw my 2 future sisters-in-law slide into a horseshoe-shaped table through the bar mirror. Their husbands slid close to one another. My wedding plans, just 8 weeks away, were in peril, according to the instant knot in my stomach and agony that appeared to cover every inch of my body. Her sister-in-law ought to have been at the casino with Emily. I remarked to Tommy, "I have to walk outdoors for a little after catching the bartender's eye. I pledged to be back." "Not too bad, Ryan. If I open this space and place your drink on the shelf, is okay?" Tommy inquired as he went for my glass. I nodded in accord and walked from Toby's. Sitting in my car at the rear of the parking lot, I mentally drew out what I had to do. Emily answered, "Hey darling, how is the big city?" when I called her. "It is the same as usual." We closed a good negotiation, and I'm headed for dinner. I wish you were right here. Ryan, you are quite sweet. I too miss you. All day we have having a ball. We drank and lounged around the pool. I started my wedding tan really nicely. I'm dining with my sisters in a few minutes. After a little more conversation, Emily and I said I love you and hung up the call. I put in Emily's information after looking over the Find My Phone app. Although I'm not sure Emily was, her phone was in Falmouth, Massachusetts on Cape Cod's western coast. Hell, I contemplated, Nick Flaherty, Emily's friend and longtime neighbor, had a family house in Falmouth. Many times we had been invited there. Reviewing my contacts, I came onto Sue Flaherty's cell phone number. "Hi Sue, it's Ryan Carter." I called, and after Sue answered, Ryan asks, "Ryan Carter, what a pleasant surprise. How are the preparations for the wedding developing? I am eager to be there, as is Nick. To be very honest, I'm not sure how the plans are progressing." Sue giggled and remarked, "That's a typical male response. Hey Sue, what are the odds Nick might be on travel this weekend? What an unusual question is this. Though he is traveling this weekend, Nick hardly ever has to travel over a butt. Regarding what is this about?" Sue asked with a small degree of worry. "Do you have a Find Your Phone app on your phone?" Before I respond, Sue started to cry involuntarily, then whispered in a near whisper, "Not again." She went on a minute later. "He should be in Philadelphia, but the tracker shows he is at his family's cottage." I sighed sadly and replied, "I'm sorry, Sue, Nick and Emily are together." Sue spent several minutes softly crying. She said, "Not sure this is the first time. I'm going to warn the SOB not to come home over the phone. Sue, would you kindly help me?" When she didn't reply, I went on. "Emily isn't due home until Sunday afternoon." "That's the same with Nick," she said. I asked, "Let's postpone our confrontation to tomorrow evening. I'll take half the wedding money from a shared joint account, and change the locks on my condo door in the meantime. I may load all of her clothes and other personal belongings and arrange the bags on the driveway. Ryan, you are correct. I will act in the same manner. If you need someone to talk to, please text or phone. I apologize for having to phone you. Sue was crying once again. Between sobs, Ryan, it's not your fault. My last call to a friend and neighbor was to Billy Jones. Topher asked, "What's up?" "Billy, I need some assistance. Are you around early tomorrow morning?" I requested. My sole plans are to sleep till 12. Sally will have me up at 7. For you, what can I do? Could you perhaps update the lock on my front door as well as the door entering from the garage? And I would appreciate it if you could alter the garage door opener's code. Silence followed until Billy said, "Hell is the wedding off." I answered, "Emily and I are dead and buried unless I am missing something major." You really understood, Topher. After first thing in the morning, I visited Lowe's and had everything altered late morning. Does that turn out? Billy, you indeed gamble it does. Thank you. 20 years older, I hobbled back into Toby's and headed to the bar. Tommy handed me back my bourbon when I was staring at a mirror reflecting my sister's-in-law and their husbands. The waitress was clearing their appetizers. I went to the table of my ex-future family with a bar seat and a drink. Tommy said, "Hey Ryan, you can't take the stool from the..." My angry glare stopped Tommy short. The mood became frigid very soon when I placed the stool at the end of the table, hopped into the seat, and aggressively stared back and forth between Samantha and Karen. "Ryan, pal, slide into the booth." "Steve," said Karen's husband, "we'll grab you a menu." I answered without staring away from the woman. "No, thank you, Steve. I'm not planning to stay very long." I kept silently staring at Samantha and Karen until Mark, Samantha's husband, remarked, "Ryan's? What's going on?" I answered, "Asking your wife, Mark." Turning toward their wives, Mark and Steve. It was clear that both ladies were terrified right to death. "What is happening?" Steve posed questions to the sisters. Speaking first was Karen, who stated, "Ryan, it's not what you think." As I gazed across the table toward Karen, the heavy tension built. I told the group I guess precisely what I believe. Looking back and forth between their wives at one end of the table and me at the other, Steve and Mark were debating. Steve asked, "What's going on, Ryan?" Tears were pouring down Karen's face. "Your spouses are covering for Emily. Last Tuesday, they were all gathered in my kitchen. They were heading to Foxwoods Casino for a getaway weekend because I was out of town until Sunday." "Emily is at where?" Mark posed questions to the sisters. He turned and stared at me when they still said nothing. "She's visiting Nick at Cape Cod." "Yes, that is accurate," Steve hissed. By now, both ladies were crying. Karen nodded to agree. "Ryan," Samantha blubbered, "Emily loves you. She truly does." Mark squinted at the tabletop while Steve rolled his eyes. "She shows her affection in a really beautiful way. She lies to me and leaves with an old neighborhood crush for a love fest weekend just 8 weeks before she marries me. Your sister is a garbage piece. Not daring is what you did." Mark cut off his wife and declared, "Shut the heck down, Samantha." He asked, turning to me, "What are you going to do?" "I am going to call off the marriage." Levers back in the booth, both pals leaned. Their women broke down even more. Said Karen, "Dad has lavished so much money on the wedding and celebration. Not that I care. I'm not going to wed a woman who lies and chews like Emily." I waited a few minutes before addressing the gathering. "Nick is cheating with Emily. I have notified Sue Flaherty. We both would prefer 24 hours before we smash them." I asked Mark and Steve. 4 sets of eyes were staring at me. "I need your help. Could you check if my head swung toward their wives? Could you make sure Emily isn't contacted till tomorrow night at 6:15 p.m.? Before Steve spoke, both women began to demonstrate. "We definitely could, buddy." Then he turned to his wife and said, "I find you repulsive. I have to wonder whether your sisters have ever covered for you while you cheated on me." As Steve went on, Karen found herself stunned. "I'll think about divorcing you or Samantha if you or her contact Emily in any capacity." Mark had a brilliant red, angry face. When he remarked, following the difficulties we had at the beginning of our 3rd year together, I might file for divorce either way, and Samantha sighed sadly. But understand, if you get in touch with Emily, I will absolutely file. I left the restaurant shaking the hands of both men. Saturday proved to be really active. Eliminating the last trace of Emily from our house took several hours. I rented a tiny storage facility, and my neighbor Billy offered me his pickup instead of piling the full rubbish bags in the driveway. 3 visits were all it needed to have every bag off of my land. Composing an email to our wedding guests proved to be the toughest chore of the day. Over the day, I bit and piece worked on the email. Subject, it read, Carter and Bennett's wedding update. To friends, dear. Just 8 short weeks before my wedding day, I am midway through a fantastic weekend to Emily Bennett. The weekend was amazing since I learned Emily had spent hers in another man's bed. Emily and her longtime friend Nick Flaherty misled Nick's wife, Sue. The pair is spending this weekend on Cape Cod with Emily's sisters Karen and Samantha, with their lies helping guide them. You could question why I find such great value in this terrible behavior. There is a straightforward reason. I am not wed to Emily. Canceling a wedding is a lot simpler than going through the suffering of a divorce. My official notice that I am postponing my wedding to Emily Bennett is this email. Respectfully, Ryan Carter. On Saturday afternoon, I called Sue Flaherty at 5:30. We filled in one other on the chores we could finish together. Sue was married, hence her distance from Nick would be considerably more difficult. She had an appointment set for Monday morning and spoke with an attorney on Saturday morning. The lawyer had advised separating family funds as much as possible and canceling shared credit cards. In the case of divorce, it was standard legal advice. A few minutes before 6 p.m., we ended our call and decided to SMS our husbands exactly 6. My text just said, I hope your weekend with Nick is going great. I appreciate you showing me and the universe you lie, cheat, and unfaithful woman creates. We are postponing our wedding. I sent the text precisely at 6 p.m. A moment later, I emailed our relatives and guests. 16 months later, I stood at the altar's brink. To the left, flanking me, were my best man and groomsmen. Individually looking as beautiful as the last, the maid of honor and bridesmaids had individually followed the center aisle of the church. I turned to gaze behind the church and started to cry. Standing tall in his black tuxedo, Emily's father looked great. Like my eyes and the others of our guests, his gaze fixed on the most exquisite bride ever. Under the little white veil, her blonde hair looked great and was groomed. Her blue eyes gleamed with affection, and her full red lips sent me terrible ideas of our forthcoming wedding night. Her beautiful shape was accentuated by the form-fitting white wedding dress without drawing attention to her flaws. Perfect, exactly. I felt 2 eyes burning a hole through me as Mr. Bennett and my bride began down the aisle toward me. Before looking to the bride's side of the church, I checked the visitors on my end. I met Emily at that point. Tears were running down her cheek. She silently said, I'm sorry, then turned toward her father and younger sister approaching me. And so the narrative of today comes to an end. Was it what you anticipated, or did it veer from what you would have expected? I would like your opinions. Share them in the space provided for comments below to start a discussion. Make sure you press the like button if this tale caught you. And now is the ideal opportunity to become part of our community, whether you recently moved here or have not yet subscribed. Every day I bring you fresh, gripping stories. Click that subscription button and put on notifications to ensure you never miss out. I appreciate you seeing. Next one will see you.